Welcome to my week 2 of self-quarantine here in Spain. I want to use this video to jump into the NIO financials and give you an update of what I think is the most important things to have a look at if you are invested in NIO or if you are looking to invest in NIO. But look outside here, it's beautiful. Currently it's not raining anymore and we have a very beautiful outlook here and are isolated from all of the other people around here. So it's really a perfect place to be and to take some time in order to dig into some financials. And look at this, we even got a painting of Jesus in the room, so what could possibly go wrong? No, seriously, these are frightening times for investors, of course, as the markets are tanking and lots of people are losing out on their positions. And then if you are invested in high-risk companies such as NIO, the shares might even go to zero, or at least you have possible reasons to be afraid of that. So let's talk about what's the situation for NIO, should you be worried, and should you maybe sell your position, and also how I keep my stocks, or what did I do during this financial crisis so far. What I'm trying to do in this video is to give you a good understanding of the situation of NIO right now and trying to read a little bit between the lines of what have been said in a conference call. I'm not trying to go too deep into the sales numbers. That's something that you can listen to by yourself if you listen to the conference call of the NIO management. And also, I don't think it's too much of a relevancy right now because, as I mentioned before, I think for NIO it's now only about the survival, and also it's not too much on the short-term numbers because they will be bad anyways. So my personal takeaway of this earning call was that it was quite positive, and this time actually even a little bit bullish from the management, which I like to see of NIO doing more in the future actually. And despite reporting some very low sales numbers, which I actually expected, I think the bigger picture here was quite obvious, and I used a slump in the NIO sales share price to actually acquire more shares during this downturn. So I bought first at $3.7 a share, then when the big downturn happened, I bought more at around $3 a share, and I bought even more below the $3 mark because I thought, well, that's a good price to gather more shares and to bring down my cost basis. And obviously the recent downturn in the NIO share price has been largely driven by the market sell-off. I did another video, I'll link it for you guys, in which I talk about my China depot, in which I also hold some NIO stocks, but in general I'm talking about how the market is reacting in this crisis, and actually also some trading mistakes that I did. So go and watch it if you want to know more about that. And obviously the markets are also getting more worried about NIO's financials. So there have been negative reports in the media, and I guess this is also why lots of you guys are asking me how I see the situation with NIO. So let's dive into that and find some fundamentals here and also reasons to be more bullish and confident right now. That being said, I think the current market crisis and also the NIO cash-strapped business is very healthy for NIO right now in order to get leaner, to optimize some processes, and that's what has been confirmed during this earning call, that NIO is almost finished with the restructuring. So they also had to let people go. Staff is reduced down from 10K employees down to 7K employees worldwide. And in the past, NIO has also been criticized for their hugely blown up financials in terms of spending on the NIO houses and so on. All of this is now going into a direction that they try to save money wherever they can. And I think in these kind of times is where you want to become an investor in a company, because this is when those kind of companies are only seeing bad news, the press is all negative, people are in fear, they're panicking, they're selling their shares. But in the meantime, the actual work on the financials is getting done, and the management is usually working on improving the cash flow position, cutting down expenses and so on. So you're actually investing in a company that will become more healthy in the situation and get out of this, if it gets out, more healthy and confident than it ever was before. So the management of NIO is now expecting positive gross margins by the mid of the year, and even two-digit positive margins by the end of the year. So that's very important, because obviously this will help for those investors who are the large-scale investors who are looking towards the profitability to get back into NIO, and this will also keep driving the share price in the future. And those kind of gross margins will be, for one part, driven by the cost measurements and the cost savings and the expense controls that partly have been put into place by our new CFO. And on the other hand, on the fundamentals of the business with decreasing battery cost technology and also new negotiated deals with their suppliers and third-party producers. So this is the outlook that the management is giving, and is actually bullish on it and confident. This is good to see. And on the other hand, obviously we see those low numbers in sales currently, obviously because of the Rona situation and also because of the downturn in the market in China. But as I'm outlining in some of my videos before, actually we should see a recovery happening during this year. And despite this downturn, NIO has actually managed to get through this better than the industry average. I also made another video about this. So the sales numbers are year on year only down around 13%, whereas for the competitors they're around minus 80%. So also some positive bright spots here in this kind of area. But as I mentioned before, I'm not looking too much at the sales numbers for now. They are weak, and they're gonna be weak in the next conference call as well. So the most fundamental part for me, instead of those kind of short-term sales numbers, is the big question: can NIO survive, and how can they survive with the current financial and cash position? And this is why I have been selling NIO off in the past and why I'm now going to buy back in. And I'm going to show you how I look at this. By the end of Q4, I was very worried about the NIO's cash position. They had possibly less than $200 million, maybe even $100 million in the bank. They issued 200 million convertible bonds by Tencent and Luckin, the founder of NIO, and that was all they had. Plus, many of the financing deals were seemingly falling through, so that was a very dire financial situation given the high burn rate of NIO. But what has happened now and has been confirmed during this earnings call is that NIO for once has still the agreement about a possible government funding with a local government in Hefei in China. So that's where NIO will move their headquarters and get some local factory and partnership in order to get more than $1 billion in investment in a local entity. Plus, NIO has been keeping on raising more convertible bonds, so in total they raised more than $400. And if we look at the situation here now in my Excel napkin calculation about NIO, this already looks much better. So my basis for the calculations is just a revenue estimation, and for that I'm looking at therefore I'm looking at how many cars NIO might be selling during the Q1. And we already know the January and February numbers. So in January they have sold around 1,600 cars, and in February around 700 cars. And my best guess is that they may sell up to 1,600 cars in March. So that would leave them at around about 3,900 cars in total for Q1. Might be actually a too optimistic number here, but I'm currently working with that and use it in order to make projections about the revenue. I'm using those sales projections in order to multiply them with the average sales price of their cars, and as we see here in this charts, they have been declining partly due to the ES6, which is a more cheap car in the Chinese market, but also possibly because they used lots of marketing and referral incentives in order to sell off more cars in a rush. So I'm actually critical of this kind of methodology in order to sell more cars. That's one of the weaknesses and pain points in the NIO business model right now. But there's also some good news on that, because the NIO ES8 is actually now selling at a higher price comparably to the Mercedes EQC. So that's actually a very interesting experiment here by NIO. Whereas they have been previously positioning themselves as a more affordable manufacturer, they're now even getting into this luxury league together with some German brands, and thereby kind of monetizing what they have really done well in building their brand as a premium to luxury manufacturer. So if this works out, we may see higher average sales prices again in the future, and that will really help the bottom line of the NIO business. But now based on the 3,900 cars that they may sell during Q1, I'm estimating the same average sales price here as in Q4, and that gives us roughly a revenue of around 200 million. It will possibly be less than that, possibly 180 or 170 million US dollars for this quarter, as the management already outlined this more or less. So let's just calculate with the 200 million US dollars here, and also have a look at their recent numbers in terms of what has been the average net loss. And during the earning calls, we also got a hint by the management that the net loss will be minus 30% during the first quarter. So I'm calculating with the last net loss and subtract 30% of that net loss and take it as a new net loss for the quarter one. So now the interesting part is to model their cash situation, and NIO reported around 150 million in a cash position, so that's very low given the NIO burn, but we also know that they have closed the convertible bonds already, so we have an inflow of more than 400 million US dollars here, 435 million US dollars to be exact. And if we now look at the estimations for the revenues and the net loss of the next quarter plus the income of the funding situation, I'm calculating that by the end of Q1, NIO should be able to have around 400 million US dollars in cash in the banks. So why is this important? Well, first of all, this is still not the cash cushion that NIO actually needs. So in order to get through 2020, they need a much better cash situation, and also they need much more to actually go on their growth plans and execute on that. However, 400 million US dollars in cash in the bank is now already a much better situation than they have had in Q4 when I sold off my shares, because during that time they have possibly been away only days from a bankruptcy. But now 400 millions in the bank with the reduced cash burn situation and the outlook that they may get a funding with the Hefei agreement, this is actually very bullish and I think very positive in terms that the outlook is very realistic that NIO can get the situation solved and survive in 2020. And the important part here once again is that with the Hefei announcement, NIO will not get the 1 billion US dollars in funding into the NIO entity that you are invested in, the US part. No, it will be a separate Chinese entity. But once that one is fully funded and operational, NIO can actually go and execute on their plans in terms of the production that what they want to do, in terms of growing, because they can use the money for many things that they need to do and investing domestically in China, because these are RMB funds. On the other hand, you are invested in this entity that has more than 400 million US dollars on cash during Q1 possibly, and by the beginning of Q2 we should get the confirmation on the Hefei agreement. If it falls through, that is obviously very bad news, but if it comes to life, which I personally think is very realistic, then NIO can use this money in the China entity to fund most of the operational works, most of the investments that are needed to execute on 2020. And suddenly the pressure on the US entity is getting far less. So we will see the cash burn in this entity to go down even further, because most of the things that are currently financed and go through this entity will be taken over by the Chinese entity. So given this situation, I think 400 million in the banks is very realistic to get NIO through the situation and finally make the agreement with the Hefei government. And then I think the 400 million should actually be sufficient to get more funding for the US entity as well. But it will release the stress on this entity immensely, and we got more time to actually get some more US dollars funding. So this is how I'm currently thinking about NIO and why I'm actually quite relaxed about a share price downturn or this current economic situation, because I think NIO actually already survived the worst part for now, always assuming that agreement with the local government in Hefei will work out. But this situation should also help you look over some small sales that are being reported and all the negative media. What you should be watching instead as a NIO investor is Will the Hefei government announcement and agreement come into place? Will this be realistic? Will this become operational during April? Because then all of the bullish announcements that are made in the earnings call will become much easier for NIO to achieve, and then I think we should have a bright spot in 2020, and actually we can focus on the valuation again of NIO and the growth and actually the sales numbers. And in my next video on NIO, I will actually tell you why I actually think that the current share price is then really a bargain right now, and what could be a possible valuation of NIO in the near-term future and also in the outlook if the Hefei deal finally comes to life. And I hope this also should answer some of your questions about the NIO spending regarding, battery swapping, technology, NIO houses and so on. Most of this kind of things will be taken over by the Chinese entity. And yes, it is in question if those kind of aspects of the business models are actually preferable to what is out there as a competition. But my personal opinion is that the NIO houses have helped for NIO to establish this brand, which they are now trying to monetize with higher average sales prices. And the battery swapping technology could actually mean that they will get a better deal with the Chinese government, who are looking to investing in such kind of a technology. So even though, yes, I also think Tesla's approach is the right way of, quick charging the batteries, I don't see an issue with NIO going to the swapping technology. No, in some ways this can actually be a preferred way, at least by the Chinese government, and the Chinese ways of doing things are oftentimes different than what is happening in the West. So I think that's quite normal and can be some very positive things here for NIO. Anyway, still let me know every question you have regarding NIO and the business situation and the business model and the financial situation. I'm reading all of your comments, so please let me know down below what are your current biggest fears or questions regarding NIO. And I cannot give you advice. What is your personal situation with NIO in terms of should you sell it off or should you hold it or should you buy more? But I'm also inviting you to follow my journey in terms of following how I'm investing in it. And if you enjoy this kind of information, please give it a like and a thumbs up, because this really helps us to build a small channel, and we will give you more information in the future. Also, hopefully back soon in China. Currently, we're banned from traveling to China because of the Rona situation. However, we still are closely related to our partners and friends and businesses in China, so we know what's going on the ground, and very looking forward if this situation is finally resolved in hopefully very soon, and then we can also have more positive outlook on the economy in general as well. So thank you guys for watching. Please stay healthy and hope you get through this in a very good way. See you next time and have a good weekend.